Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming up this morning and being part of this Fans Forum, a first event at a Final Four weekend, a chance for you to question three of the men that control our sport in this country. Now, a few house rules. First of all, those of you that have got phones, can you turn them to silent? Those of you that are tweeting, feel free, tweet the hell out of today and use the Playoff Finals weekend hashtag as well. That would be fantastic. Second of all of you have submitted questions. We'll try and get through as many questions as we can through the course of the next hour and a half. Wait, though, until you get the microphone. This is all being filmed, so it's going to be put up on YouTube later. So if you just start shouting out for questions, it won't make any sense to everybody else that may want to watch it somewhere down the line. So what I'll do is I'll acknowledge you. We'll get the mic to you. You can introduce yourselves, say your team, and then you can address your question to any of the three or all of the three. One thing I will say, let's try not to get too bogged down in team-specific stuff here, because it's going to be really awkward, and it's going to go on for a long time if we start doing that. And we've only got three of the owners up here, and so, again, let's try and keep this about what the Elite League's doing. Apart from that, I think these three are fair game. Can we give them, first of all, a big round of applause for coming and putting themselves in front of the Lions? Does everybody know the three at the front? Let me introduce them to you. First of all, Todd Kelman, Neil Black, and Steve Ward.
Morning.
So the three of you, I get the first question. I might even get the last question of this as well. Just to start off with, the Elite League this year, has it been a good year? Has it been a bad year? And what for you has been the most pleasing aspect of the last season, Todd?
I think it's been the most competitive. I think that the league title going down to the last weekend was exciting. I know last year in Belfast, I was part of it and they ran away with it and it wasn't that exciting. This year with 2 Champions League spots up for grabs, with Cardiff being kind of renewed and Coventry, when Coventry got Chuck Webber in and they sort of turned it around, it became every single weekend there seemed to be competitive games and the Scottish teams did really, really well. There weren't any teams that really was an easy game, and I think actually, with all respect to Braehead, I think it was actually good that Braehead took it to the end and maybe didn't win it, because the big argument was that this conference thing doesn't work, and I know we'll probably touch on the conference stuff, but Braehead not winning isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I think people had an argument to say like, this conference thing, it's a joke, it's set up, Braehead's going to win it every year, and they haven't. So I think as far as the way it went this season, couldn't have gone better as far as league competition and competitiveness, really.
Neil?
Yeah, I think it was a very good season until the last 2 weeks. That's my sort of comment. Excellent season up to March the 23rd.
Okay, congratulations on the one trophy. It's very well done. Steve?
Well, I think it's been a really good season. Although we finished last, the games were still competitive up to the end. Even in Dundee, when we had nothing to play for, there was still a lot of competitive games. The league's definitely getting stronger every year. This is our 5th season in the league, and I would say year on year it's become a stronger, more competitive league. The quality of player, even the British players, are coming up to a better standard. I certainly see that from our side, where we tend to go for local guys, maybe bring the odd British player in, but on the whole, I think the British players rising as well, so I think that's a great thing going forward, especially when you see the GB set up. But yeah, it's been a great season. The Champions League thing's been a good thing as well that Nottingham took part in. 2 teams this year. I think everything's looking really good for the league going forward,
Okay, well that's their take on it, but what about you lot? Stick your hands in the air with a question. We'll start with you because you're at the front. Dan, if you want to come around. An Edinburgh Capitals fan, welcome.
Hi, I'm Mel Craig from the Edinburgh Capitals. Sorry.
A bit closer.
Okay, so my question is about the Department of Player Safety. There's been a lot of concerns raised over the season about consistency of decisions and transparency. I wondered if there are any plans to change the way that works going forward next season.
Todd, you want to handle this?
Sure. I actually think that the DOPS setup was a great idea. I think having videos up online, and what a sultry voice on those videos, by the way.
He's not bad.
But cheap. Having the setup, I think the system itself was really, really good. And in principle, when we all decided on it, when we discussed it in advance of the season, I think it was the right system. I actually don't think it worked the way we wanted it to. I think that we made an error by not putting something out on the website, explaining the procedure, explaining who's involved. The one thing that people don't realize, like most of these leagues that have a DOP set up besides the NHL, it's an anonymous group of people. But for some reason, it seemed that there wasn't consistency. I thought it was going well, and then all of a sudden you'd be blown away by a decision, and then it just got to be kind of blown out of proportion with like, you just never knew what was going to happen. So I would like to see the same setup. I love that fans and other teams can see the video of what happened and see an explanation. But did I agree with some of the calls? And not the ones that affected us, but no, like some of them were wrong, definitely wrong. And I think it was always going to be a process that needed work. I don't want to see it thrown out. I don't want to go back to having one guy make a decision and no video and no explanation. I want to see it develop and improve. And I think we're going there. No one thought. No, I didn't think we were going to solve the problem and make it way better in 1 year. But I think we're getting there. But yeah, I'm probably like every fan, like frustrated with some calls and other ones I agreed with, and other ones I was just blown away by what the result was.
Have you got any explanation as to why that was the case?
I don't think that. I just think that. I remember because we talked about it, we said we should have something on the website that outlines what DOPS is in advance of the season, and then it just never happened. And we should have done it. We screwed up. Like generally, we should have something on there that says this is DOPS. There are, like, we kind of know the procedure. There's 10 people that get sent the videos, and instead of announcing, oh, this guy and this guy and this guy reviewed it and did this, I don't think you have to get that detailed. But fans should be able to see there's 20 guys on the list. 3 or 4 of them review each video. This is the procedure. This is how it's decided on. But sometimes the decision was turned around in 24 hours. Other times players played a game and then it was turned around. There was no consistency. And that's where fans, that's when you look at it in the leagues, like the fans are saying, the league's so disorganized. They always say the league, and it's frustrating because like sometimes it's not the league. Sometimes it's down to 3 or 4 people that represent the league that aren't consistent, and that's where we screwed up. So.
And I guess as well, the other problem you do have, and being part of the process, what I know is that sometimes videos weren't arriving till Monday after an incident that happened on a Saturday because clubs weren't getting them back from all the different cameras that they may have within their rink, so they wouldn't actually see the incident in full or have the evidence in full. So it's a difficult one, competing with technology and the time frames required when you're turning things around. Steve, how do you see it developing then next year?
For the first season, I thought it worked really well, although there was, as Todd says, a lot of hitches, and I understand how the question comes from Edinburgh, because I think you guys were at the sharp end of a lot of the wrong decisions, no doubt about it. At the board meetings when it first came in, we wanted to know who DOPs were, and then it was this 10 people who are from Denmark, North America, they're from all over. So it is a good system, but it certainly needs a lot more work done on it. And I agree with Todd, I wouldn't really want to go back to what we had before. And the fact that we as owners can't get involved in the decision making is the best way to do it. Because obviously everybody's got their own agendas, they want to win the next game, they don't want their best player to be suspended, so for that reason it works really well because we have no say in what happens. What we will have a say in is how we take it forward and how we can improve the system, because it definitely needs improvement. Because we were at the sharp end of a bad call as well during the season, where through no fault of our own, we got a fine of £1,000. So I've got that one under review because there's no way I'm happy doing that. So there is things that need to be improved upon, but without a doubt it's the best system that's going to be in place going forward, and we just got to improve it.
Anybody else got any DOPS related questions?
Hi, Adam Burke, Spider Shirt, Nottingham. A DOPS related thing, and it's going quite fairly specific, but it relates to everything. Steve Lake, one of our defensemen, was hit by someone from another team. The guy from the team got a 4-game ban, none of them against us. We lost Steve Lake, one of the best British defensemen, for 20 games. It seems unfair that a guy who deliberately tried to injure someone has got 4 games, which doesn't help us. And we lost under our star players Twins game.
I think the issue is
The question, Todd, just for those that may not have heard, is essentially, I'll paraphrase, should the bans be related to the time that a player's out?
Yeah.
The incident he was talking about was Stevie Lee missing 20 games. The guy that made the hit got a 4-game ban.
And I think it's also, can I just say, that's a very difficult topic because, and that's often discussed at the board meeting. I suppose, obviously, it concerned Nottingham and Steve. I suppose you could argue, though, that in the league, every game has some significance, whether it's against you specifically or maybe against a team that you're not playing. It's very difficult, that one. Also, one of the other issues that we do discuss, haven't for a while, but I'm not particularly happy with it, is the concept of players being suspended, non-British players, and it obviously having different ramifications for the team than British players getting suspended. Because of course, if an import gets suspended, you're effectively a player short. But if a British player gets suspended, you're not a player short, which seems to me a very strange anomaly. Also, again, with the rules. Yeah. So there are some things I don't think it's going to be particularly easy to deal with. I think the problem that we really have, the answer to that specific question is actually a question of team depth. As long as you don't have a lot of depth in your teams, this becomes an issue. We're missing a player. He's so important, we can't replace him. Again, it's because of this British differentiation, also in British and non-British. I think we're just going to have to suck that up for the minute, unfortunately.
It is a good question, though. But I think as a team, it's going to come back to you sometime. You're probably one of your players is going to injure a player from another team, and the suspension is going to work for your team's favour otherwise. Because through time it comes round that you're all going to have suspensions and you're all going to have injuries to players that will be maybe out for 10 weeks, and it seems unfair at the time that guy only got a 2, 3 or 4 game ban, whereas your guy's out for 20 weeks. But I've been in this game a long time, and eventually it'll come back that you're on the other end of that, you know what I mean? So it does go around, although it does seem unfair at the time, certainly, you know.
Any more DOPS related questions? Yes. Do you want to get the gentleman there in the red jacket?
Thank you. John Thomas, Panthers supporter. It's really related to the same incident. I know you don't want to go on about individual clubs and incidents too much, but I'm thinking from the legal perspective, both the league and the clubs have a legal responsibility, a duty of care to their players. Do you think that the current DOPS system gives the league enough protection against possible lawsuits? I mean, we're talking about the injury in question is something that could be career-ending, serious concussion.
Yeah, I don't think though that's a DOP specific question, because that's just a question of what happens specifically in the game. In fact, interest.
What I'm saying is really, is there a case for a mandatory ban of say 10 games for?
Yeah, but see, sometimes you can have a player injured seriously, like I don't want to get team specific, but let's just say our goalkeeper in Belfast, and it was the judge there. I think most people accept it was just an accident, but unfortunately we have a goalie who ends up in hospital. I'm sure every team's had the same. I mean, strangely, the legal issue is actually the reverse issue, because we're grappling with the fact that there isn't much of an appeal procedure for players at all. And in fact, what has been raised is the unfairness of that particular system, the fact that we can suspend players. I think at the moment, if they're suspended for less than 3 games, there's no appeal.
3 or less.
3 or less. There's a big discussion going on at the moment as to the merits of that system. That, for instance, if a player gets suspended, he can't appeal.
And I guess one of the problems with that is the fact
timings
that
of games.
time and finance to be able to do
correct.
all of those things properly, it costs an awful lot of money. I know, speaking to Scott Neal this year, when they were appealing the Emerson ban at the start of the year, they ended up having to spend an awful lot of money on getting a lawyer to go down to a disciplinary hearing to try and get everything sorted out. So it's the biggest conundrum, isn't it? Trying to balance fairness, finance, and the best thing for the sport.
Yeah. And the timings of the games, which is a big issue, because some of us have been here a long time. We've all seen the history of people manipulating certain kinds of procedures. We've all done it. I'm sure every team's done it. And the problem is, the moment there are some of us quite concerned that the moment you allow sort of an appeal procedure, you'll get a scenario where there will be 2 games left in the season, a player gets banned for 3 games, you can guarantee the club will appeal, stretch it out for a week, the player plays, end of season.
The good thing though, sorry to interrupt, the good thing that fans maybe don't understand that they need to understand is it's not the best system it's not the best right now, it's the best system available, and you might not realize this, but every game has to be, we have this software where every game has to be loaded up by, I think it's noon the next day. So every game has to be loaded up by your video people online so that it's good for video review, it's also good for scouting. So if Corey Nielsen wants to watch Cardiff versus Belfast last night, by noon the next day, it has to be up online. And that system is great because then you can, there's none of this, we used to have to we want to see Braehead versus Dundee because we're playing Braehead next week. We'll call Dundee, we'll get them to send over a video or a DVD. It was a terrible way of doing it, but now referees can go on, look at all the major penalties the next day, and the problem is there's been a few snags where this system, which is, it's a hosted system, it breaks down, so we're calling them and we're trying to find their software, their tech support, and so there's all sorts of things like that, but the system is improving, and I think as a league, our biggest concern this year is obviously DOPS and referees, and I'm sure we'll touch on referees, but that will be the focus for, as a board, what we probably have to improve on, and we're like you, we don't sit around and think, wow, everything's rosy, this is great, we're doing a brilliant job. We actually, when we discuss at board meetings, most of the time we're thinking, what do people want to see? How do we improve this? We're not thinking how can we make more money? How can we have this? How can we screw the fan over? We're actually trying to improve the thing, because for us, this kind of feedback is great, and we know that we need to improve the DOT system because we don't want people looking at it going, this is a joke, this is a terrible system. But I played in the league and I ran a team in the league when it was a terrible system where you didn't know who was reviewing. I remember Newcastle lost a tape, people were losing tapes. Oh, it was in the taxi never showed up. It was a joke. At least now we have a system that's in place that we can see it,
Going back to the tariff system, one of the slight issues with having a tariff system is that takes away from the seriousness of each individual incident. So someone can be cross-checked from behind into the boards, or checked from behind into the boards, and have no problems. Exactly the same incident, the guy can miss 20 games with a concussion. Then is it right to give the 10-game ban because one guy seems to have got a bigger injury? And that's the question, and that's why I guess DOPS was brought in, to take away from a tariff system. So it then didn't actually take into account the impact of what happened on the ice and the actual incident itself, rather than just, this is your penalty, like it, lump it. That, to me, that seems a little bit like an archaic way of doing things.
Yeah.
I think as well with the DOP system, it helps, as you say, if there's a legal case against the player, we've probably put in the best protection we can, what we know today, to protect the players, and DOPS is definitely part of that, because that, when you review it, people are getting suspended, things are getting picked up before that didn't happen. So I think we're doing things to protect the players as well. As a player protection thing as well as a penalty type system,
One final question then on DOPS, and then we'll move on to the next subject. One of you had your hand up. Yeah, we want to go over there, then we'll go to the lady at the back.
So, David Carnell from Nottingham. The biggest frustration for me was incidents that weren't explained. Again, a Panther example was when Cody Wild got injured in Coventry. We didn't get any explanation as to why I think it was Jurgensen wasn't banned. Is there any kind of plans to implement something where it explains why decisions weren't?
It's hard to do every decision that gets, because the video might show something that is like, oh, it's clear it wasn't a hit to the head or something, so they don't do it. I think they still should maybe just for transparency, maybe do a few of them when they're really controversial. But there are sometimes, DOPS is a small group of people that sometimes have 30 things to review before the next weekend or something like that. So they can't always do it. But I think we have to discuss that and see if there's a process that we could show maybe the controversial ones and why they weren't banned. Because it's a good measuring stick to see why it was banned and why.
I think going forward we need to do that, because it's important that the fans know what the penalties are and what the penalties are not. So at least you know why it did happen or why it didn't happen. So you know right away, whatever that incident was, there isn't a penalty because this is their view of what happened.
But I think we should be doing that. I must say, I would prefer that the clubs to ourselves. I mean, that issue, that's up to. We should have explained it to our fans because it's only our fans who care about that. So it should be. We should be saying that this happened to Cody Wild. He didn't get. There's nothing happened because, and we can say it because we've got access to DOPS ourselves. So. Or else, probably like poor Seth, but what would be he'd have
voicing all day long.
He'd have 100 things a day to be talking a weekend. It would. We don't want to bite off more than we can chew because if we say we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then we don't do it, then people will justifiably say we didn't do it.
I think one area though that would be massively helpful, and I'm saying more on this because I know a bit more about it, is if on a Monday morning would be a tweet, a press release saying DOPS are reviewing the following incidents. And then, irrespective of there being a video put out there, it just then makes it very clear to everybody, because I know certainly I've had a lot of contact with maybe even some of you in this room saying, is this incident being reviewed? Is that incident being reviewed? And I've known full well it's been reviewed. The clubs have all known it's been reviewed. The clubs have known that players are going to be suspended. They've just not known how long for, well before the game, but it's become the night before the game, before there's been an opportunity to do the video because of the way that it's worked out. So, you know, it's the small things like that that will make the system a lot more transparent, almost more than knowing who the people that are making the decisions.
Whenever there's, I'm not the bestest at all. Todd knows this much better than me. But whenever there is an injury, that is automatically reviewed. Now, the bit of the grey area.
Every injury, every major penalty, every match penalty. So if someone's injured on a play, someone match any gross misconducts or anything at the end of a game is all reviewed automatically.
But if a coach doesn't tell, for instance, a ref that a player's been injured that he might not know he's been injured, then that won't be reviewed necessarily. So there's a bit of it's up to the coach. I think it's certainly the head coach, maybe an assistant, to inform the referee that a player's been injured if he doesn't know that, so that he does review it. So sometimes, but not a lot of point complaining sort of the day after where he didn't review that well. The refs, obviously, sometimes they can tell a player's been injured, but sometimes.
Well, that happened to Scott, didn't it? The big incident with Chris Frank early on in the year, and the player who got injured, Beattie, he didn't show. He showed up for training the game the next day. He took warm up. It was only then when the doctor kind of said, "No, you can't play." The next day he collapsed and was taken to hospital. So it is a difficult thing. One more question at the back with the lady in the orange top, please, and then we'll move on to our next topic.
I'm Pam Clark from Five Flyers. You say that the DOPS system needs improvement. The biggest gripe from the fans seems to be because they don't know who's involved in it and they feel that there's certain influences getting put. Would it be better putting it out to somebody independent and making it independent?
It is independent. We don't know who makes decisions on DOPS from week to week. There's a committee of 10 people, and they're based in North America and Europe and here, and it is reviewed by them, and it's not reviewed by the same people every week. So we don't know, and it's something that we brought up at the board meeting. Should we know? But the last person who was in charge of disciplining referees was Murray Hansen last year. He was getting phone calls all night long on a Saturday and a Sunday from coaches driving home from games in Scotland or driving up to Scotland saying, why is this not happening? This guy should be banned. And it was just unworkable. So we don't have any influence now, which is the best thing that could happen, because everybody wants their team to win every game. And if you feel you've been wronged in some way by a decision by a referee, you're going to put pressure on whoever that person is to try and get that decision overturned. And that did happen in the past. Now it doesn't happen. Now the DOPS, when it comes to the league meetings, it's all about how we can improve it. No, why did you get involved in this, and why did this happen? Murray Hansen actually resigned because he was getting phone calls 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday and a Sunday and a Monday morning. So that system just couldn't work. Now nobody knows who it is on any given week, although there is a committee and a list that we know of, but we don't know who makes the decisions at that time. And that's the best way for it to work.
And also, like, the list, say there's 10 names, and some of these guys are working, they're full-time referees in North America, in the American League, USA, one guy from USA Hockey, a guy from Denmark, a guy from Austria. These guys also are maybe full-time referees in other leagues. They don't necessarily want their name on a list in the UK Elite League because they review 10 plays a year for these guys. They're part of the DOPS board. Like, there's referees in our league that are part of DOPS for other leagues, and it's a network of officials that do it for other things. Yeah, you're shaking your head. Imagine that. But let's be honest. Like in every game, whoever loses thinks they got screwed. Whoever got injured got screwed. We can't all be getting screwed by the referees every
We got
single
screwed
game.
more than anybody last year.
There you go. Yeah.
And statistics will back you up.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on then. Next topic. Who's got a question? You, sir. Oh, do you want to nip it down? Good.
I know Todd's going to bite my head off because I discussed this with him in Belfast in October. My name is Sean Phillips. I'm representing the Cardiff Devils. Over 4 periods of hockey this weekend, there were 4 instances that video review was implemented. Throughout the season, there are 8 teams that offer webcasts and the facility to offer an instant replays, and 2 that don't. The 2 that don't are arguably 2 of the better off teams in the country. Are there any plans to implement this in every single game throughout the Elite League? Because I really think it's something that needs to be done for us to consider a professional league in Europe.
Video review, yeah?
Yeah, especially as we're taking part in the Champions Hockey League, which is obviously a massive deal for the Elite League. So we need to be considered as the most professional league that we can possibly be.
Okay, Todd, do you want to take this? Neil, do you want to take this?
I think
Start with Todd.
I think
We'll chip in.
I totally agree with you. Like I think we should have video review, even if it's just one monitor where the officials can step off the ice. It doesn't have to be a team of people watching every game live, because it comes down to finance too. Because as a league, we can't afford to have another official there, because we can't afford to have another guy just sitting there watching the video review. But we could surely have a screen there that with a guy, with an intern, with a kid, with someone that works the video screen that can say, okay, you want to see that video? Come down here. There's an iPad or there's a monitor. You can
Todd,
see the video.
I'm going to stop you right now because we've got 2 men here who produce 2 of the best webcasts in the league, right? So let's find out how much it would cost to have a system of video review that you could have.
We're going to take this quote
And
to the
just,
So if you say it's free, we'll take that.
but also just how easy it would be to implement. This is Dave Burnham from Vision Mix, who does Sheffield. He did the one in Nottingham here as well.
It sounds like it should be easy, but it's in Sheffield it would be, because in theory we could feed it straight to the screen and show it over and over again. But we don't have, like Premier here. I've got a very good replay system. I'm trying to mix at the same time, so they can go back and show it over and over again. Like in Sheffield, we use a bit of software that specifically goes to the stream, but we can't put that on the screen. But then we use another camera that kind of lets us. So if we got 15-20 grand to buy a replay system, then we could. But to do it properly, that's kind of what you need to spend.
Next question.
So, but to put it in perspective, because it's an easy thing to say, isn't it? That we want video replay, they want video replay, I want video replay. But when you come down to the nuts and bolts, 15 to 20 grand. All right, there's probably a lower version that you can get than that. But then you are starting to cut corners, and then there's the question of quality. The cameras above the goals, are they proper cameras, or are they the security cameras which don't give you the definition that maybe you need to be able to tell whether the puck's crossed the line? If they aren't the best and you can't make the decision off it, is there any point in spending the money?
I think it's a good question, Sean. I thought at first you were talking about webcast. Let's take the one side. Video replay, even at 20 grand, every team should have it. I don't see it being an issue at all. You're not paying 20 grand a year. You're talking about buying something that's going to last, let's assume, at least 5 years before it's maybe completely knackered. But every team should have it. We all saw the games yesterday. 4 video reviews, 2 right, 2 wrong. It's a horrendous percentage, no doubt about it. I mean, let's not mix up 50%. I'd much prefer we had video reviews and 3-man officials than 4-man officials and no video review. I think we would get better results, less mistakes. I think that we ought to be going back to our next board meeting and saying that, every team should have video review for next season. You can either buy it yourself. If you can't afford it, the league will buy it for you, and you can hire it off the league at a cost of, I don't know, if it's 20 grand, 2 grand a year. Pay it back, you've got 10 years. There is no, in the real world now, we're running teams, we've got players, you've got banks who can lend you money or whatever. We should buy them. I mean, I think it's an absolute, I don't actually think, if we're trying to be a serious professional league, we should be looking at any excuse whatsoever other than we do it. We had the same issue in a bit with DOPS. There were clubs saying, oh, we can't load it up to DOPS, we haven't got this, we haven't got that. They're all doing it.
Neil, very easy for you to say as an owner of a team that sells out big rinks. Steve, with all due respect, you don't. How do you feel about it?
I think it's something the league should invest in. I think looking at the 4 decisions yesterday, 2 of which were obviously wrong, or that was changed, it's something we need to invest in. I've never been a great lover of the 4-man system. I think it was something we should bring in if we're doing it properly and we start from the bottom and do it right. But I think I agree with Neil on this. I think I'd rather have a video review and stick to a 3-man system than go to a 4-man system without video review. Because I think it is going to be, it sounds expensive to do 20 grand a club, but you didn't pay it up front. It's going to be something that's going to last 5, 10 years maybe in each building. The software will get better obviously as time goes by. And I think it's something we should all invest in, yeah, for sure. But it should be done as a league.
Yeah.
Dave, shall we set up the meeting right after this and we'll get it all sorted out?
I'll be going out to tender.
Seth, just real quick, it's interesting because I've spent a lot of time looking at officials, and there's a big debate about 4-man system and 3-man system, and I was the opposite. I thought we need 2 guys on the ice calling penalties, but there's we could all bring up games where they got it wrong, the wrong official called it, but there's a couple leagues now that are trying 3-man system but 2 officials and 1 linesman. And I think that's something we could, as a league, explore because it takes the pressure. You got to understand, as a referee, there's a lot of pressure in a 3-man system to make the right call. Two eyes seeing this, and they're always like, "How did he miss it? It happened right there beside him." But watch a hockey game and see how much you miss, And that's why there's video replay. That's why there's instant replays. That's why, if you have a screen that can show instant replays, it's great. But there's a couple leagues, I think it might be, I don't want to throw out a country because you guys will Google it and I'll get it wrong, but there are leagues that I talked to that said, yeah, we tried the 4-man system, we went to a 3-man system, but 2 officials, 1 linesman. And I actually think that's a good idea.
Is the other part of this, though, as well, to do with the officials? The fact that right now you have, I think your most experienced, your best officials, the guys that are going to be in charge today, are now entering their late 30s, and there's a massive gulf between the kids who are starting to come through in their early 20s. There isn't much in between, and the biggest problem is getting the experience into the guys who aren't Tom Darnell.
Nobody who officiates when they're young, when you were, but when I was playing in Canada, we all officiated. So if you were 13 years old, you had a 17-year-old kid reffing you, and you were reffing the 5-year-olds. So we all played and reffed. So it wasn't that much of a transition to move into it. But most of our officials played hockey, maybe couldn't skate as well as they could, so they became referees, or they were Canadian guys. No, I'm being serious. There's not, if you have a choice of being a ref or being a player in this country, you're going to be a player.
Yeah.
And then there's a young guy, Liam Sewell, who probably was an up-and-coming official, probably, he was 19 or 20. He came and USA Hockey came and we did the World Police and Fire Games in Belfast. And they saw him and they took him. And they took him to the US and they're like, the kid can skate. He's we can teach him how to be more confident in his calls. And they took our best potential referee. He'll never be back because he's got a full-time job. He refs in the USHL. They give him a house. They give him a car. They give him a travel allowance. And
sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's a great idea, And I think that's our biggest issue is officials. As a league, we have to improve on that.
I want to just go back to one point on the video replay because it is a point to be made, and I'm really hoping I'd like to think next season we can have video replay. Certainly, I think we need to have it everywhere, not just some places, for sure. I think that we're also maybe going to have to, if we do have it, we may have to look at an issue of how we can stop everything just going to video replay. People literally just not making decisions or just, we've got video replay now, let's, we don't want the standard of officiating to drop further because we've suddenly got video replay. Maybe we might, I think they're discussing it slightly differently, but the NHL, maybe we need to introduce a system where coaches can have a certain number of challenges per game, So we can say, hypothetically, if we've got video replay and each team has a maximum of, 3 challenges, you won't have more than 6 video replays in the game called by, we need to have a system based on, because we don't want games to go on for hours and hours and hours.
I suppose in some respects, though, now, actually, with webcasts, as you mentioned, there is a possibility of having a control room somewhere where all the games on the evening were being monitored with a telephone, where you could actually have one person in charge of of all of that. That is not a million miles from being possible, whereas 10 years ago, there's no way in the world you could have done that.
Also, like, we have video guys who, the big worry is everyone always thinks, oh, you can't have the video guy doing the Belfast game also giving the thumbs up for if it's a goal or not, right? But we have fans that are goal judges. We have fans that are penalty box workers. We have fans that are timekeepers. I don't see why to at least get it started. Like, I mean, you guys, like, for us, so I sit in the DJ booth in Cardiff games. There are goals that are scored that aren't called goals, and we've said, like, it's a goal. Like, it went through the net. It's clear as day on video. We put it out on the screens. The fans are going nuts, and we have no process of even just saying, okay, just come over here and check it out, and we've got it, or just radioing it into the penalty box and saying that was a goal. You know, ring the buzzer, tell them it's a goal, because teams aren't going to screw them because it's live on video. We're all going to see it. It's not like Gary's going to call down and be like, tell them that was a goal. It hit the post, but tell them it's a goal. Like there's some sort, like, you can't do that. You can't do that when there's live on video.
Let's take the next question. Who's got one? The gentleman there.
It's Adam Tem representing the Cardiff Devils again. Just with what Todd touched on regarding the officials and the development of officials in the Elite League, what plans are in place going forward? I mean, myself, I was interested in being an official 18 months ago, and you're given an email address on the Elite League website to email to register an interest, and maybe somebody will get back to you. And that's the process at the minute to become an official. So, I mean, where can we go to develop officials and bring up new talent?
Steve? I'll take it. It was discussed at the last meeting how we're going to develop officials, and we as a league agreed to set aside a certain amount of money this season, or for the following season, to try and develop officials. It's a conversation we've got to have with officials as to how to develop it, how to make them better. And if you're sending an email to a league that nobody replies to you, that shouldn't be happening. I mean, we're failing there, because we've got to develop the sport on the official side and the playing side. As a fan, the whole thing's got to be developed. So we're obviously falling down there if there's no avenue for people who want to become officials actually getting into the first rung of the ladder. So that's something we've got to address as a board. I'm sure that'll come up at the next meeting.
It is slightly
because that is something we've got to sort out.
It is slightly complicated though, isn't it? Because there is Ice Hockey UK, there's the English Ice Hockey Association, and there's the Elite League. Who's actually in charge of the officials who take charge of the Elite League games?
Well, Mike Hicks is the lead referee, so he effectively is in charge of the officials. That's something I don't agree with, personally. Something I think we've got to change. We need to bring the officials under an umbrella where they work on behalf of the league, and to develop the officials as well.
But we
get complaints from officials that they maybe didn't get a fair crack at the whip. So
but there is somebody that's already doing that across the bigger picture, which is Simon Kirkham. Now, surely it would be better for the Elite League, wouldn't it, that you were part of the bigger picture of British ice hockey rather than just your own little island?
I would agree with you, definitely.
Neil?
I'm not so sure everybody else agrees with me, but I agree with that.
No, definitely, I would agree. I mean, there needs to be a whole structure. There is a whole structure. I'm maybe not the best person, because I'm not all that familiar with what happens at Ice Hockey UK. There is a whole structure, because obviously officials are part of Ice Hockey UK, and that then gives them some status to play double IHF and officiate in other countries. Obviously, the official problem, it's a microcosm of players. It's the same story. We don't have enough British players. We don't have enough officials. We've spent quite a lot of time recently trying to work out a way of encouraging ex-players definitely to become officials. No disrespect to yourself. And also we want young people to come through as officials. We specifically earmarked the Challenge Cup final. One of the reasons why last year we decided to make the Challenge Cup final a standalone was so specifically whatever came out of that final as a sort of a fund, we have earmarked ourselves for official development of officials. That's what we said. So we've got an amount, it was a pretty successful event, and that in future is going to be our sort of our pool of resources to deal with some of these issues that affect the game, officials, maybe the video replay. It's that sort of idea. So we have got some resource now to deal with this. We just really need to action everything that we talk about.
Yeah, that's how we put the plan in place.
Yeah.
That's how we develop it ourselves,
Yes, sir. Different subject. Any more on officials? Come to you, and then we'll move on.
agreeing with things, agreeing with a couple of things that Neil and Todd have said. I don't know if everyone else can remember. Player named Mike Bradley used to play for Wembley. He was actually one of the best officials I've ever seen. He was a very hard player, got a lot of fires, but he knew what was happening in the game, what's late and what's cold, and how to handle a game. The second thing, I agree with Todd. The two referee system this year has worked really well. And maybe go to two referees and one linesman, as I say. Because I guess it's only in conference games because of money and the development of officials. But I was going to ask, is there any plans to roll it out for every game? Because one of the things I've noticed, when you get a big team from the conference, a smaller, they tend to do much more of the grabbing and holding and hooking. But there's only one official to Kelman. There's a lot more goes on behind the play in a game like that. You only got one official, so
yeah.
It's almost like they're being the other way around it.
Yeah, like I think we talk about this a lot at the board level, because the thing with the 4-man system, talk to any league that went from a 3-man system to a 4-man system, and I actually remember the guy from Austria, when I talked to him, he said, get ready for refereeing to be worse for the first year, because it takes a while for that. You know, like we thought, oh, we'll make sure there's a senior official and a younger official working together, but it doesn't always work, because what you have to remember is, say we've got 10 referees or 12 referees, you've also got, like, we seem really organized when you look at all the systems. We have an online system where you have to say when your availability is as a referee. So you go on in the month, there's this game, I'm available for the following, I'm available for every game, tick, 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 tick. But these guys have normal jobs, right? So they have to wait for their shift to come out. So sometimes teams are like, where's the allocation? We don't know who's reffing what game. Well, it's because, 9 of the 10 officials maybe haven't responded yet and filled in the. So there's a lot of back end stuff that has to be better, has to be improved on. But so then there's games where Darnell and Hicks are reffing a game between Hull and Fife, and everyone's pissed off because they're like, what the hell? Why is they doing that game instead of the Sheffield Nottingham game? They're the top 2 officials, whatever. So there's all these scenarios that have to be considered. But I think you have to have 2 officials. The only way you're going to ever get better, and whether it's a 3-man system with 2 officials, linesman isn't as tough as being a referee. No question. I think we all know that. But the only way you can improve referees is to give them experience. And I don't think throwing a referee into a 3-man system where he's the only referee gives him a chance to get better. Because Dalglish, who I thought was an up-and-coming referee, I thought he did a really good job last year. Ask him why he quit. He quit because he just hated it. He hated the pressure. He hated walking out of there. Every time any team saw him, they bitched and complained and yelled at him, and it's draining. Like, I mean, it's tough to be yelled at and screamed at every time. You screwed up. Oh, I didn't see it. I turned around. There's a guy on the ice. I don't know what happened. Do I call a penalty? Do I ask the linesman? Well, the linesman can only make certain calls. It's a flawed system. You need more people watching it, and it's very easy for all of us watching webcasts or seeing instant replays to see it and go like, that was a trip, or that was a high stick or whatever. But they don't have access to this, so give them another set of eyes, and hopefully it improves. And if you're working with, it's like playing on a team. You have to think of the officials as the extra team in the league, right? So I wouldn't sign a guy out of the EPL and make him my first line center, and say like, well, he's good enough to be. He's a centerman. I'll make him my first line center. Well, I wouldn't do that. I'd put him on the 3rd line or maybe the 10th forward and let him work his way in and develop, and that's how you improve the system. You can't just take a bunch of guys from the EPL, make them full-time officials in the Elite League, and that's it,
Briefly on officials, last question.
Yeah, Neil mentioned that the reason, or the way that we solve the shortage of British players is to bring in more imports. If we want to improve British talent, and improve the referees, surely it's a good idea to even consider bringing in a few import officials and dropping the import limit, and then you're better financed with the officials. You get more British players up and coming, playing with the top players in the league. Is that something the league has considered, just to maybe have 2 or 3 to lead the programme, or?
Well, I don't think, Sean, I said what you said. I think you started saying I said something about British players.
It was just passed across that the shortage of you said in passing that a complaint is we have a shortage of British players, and
I said the officials thing. The situation with officials is a microcosm of the British thing. We don't have lots of players.
Yeah,
that's the thing. Well, I don't know if this is a different. Are we going to? Is this a topic of?
It's the same about the referees. Yeah, is it worth bringing in a few more import referees to counterbalance the lack of British referees, or?
It's something we've discussed at board level. We've actually put feelers out to see if we can bring
had some
referees
refereed this season.
You did it this year, didn't you?
Yeah, we had some.
Well, we did a system where there's a referee swap where we had a couple from Austria, a couple from Denmark come in. But the idea of going out and getting, because you got to think the quality of hockey. You could go to an under-18 league in North America, or like what we would call junior B league, and the quality of refereeing is going to be as good or better than what we have in this league, right? And those guys are part-timers. And what you're looking for is, are there in Canada 20, 22-year-old players, or referees, not players, that have British passports or British grandparents or Irish passports or something. There's a lot of Canadians with European descent that wouldn't need work permits to come over here, that could come here and do what we all did when we wanted to play. I'm going to give it a try for a year. I'm going to come over to the UK and see if I can referee for a year. But the thing is, we'd have to house them, we'd have to give them a vehicle, we'd have to give them full-time salaries. But when you add up the game fees and the travel fees and all that kind of stuff, you're not that far off being able to do that, being able to afford that. But I think it's an option, and I think it's something we've discussed at the board level. And I think when's our next board meeting? April 21st. I think that's going to be on the top of the list, is how we do this, and it's an option, definitely an option.
We grapple with it an awful lot. I mean, I'd like all people to realise, we know it's not a perfect system. There's the topic that comes up regularly about having more local officials that were more local to the rink at the games, because obviously that would have a slight financial benefit. Then you get, of course, people saying, well, that's the last thing you want, is to have, you go up to Scotland, and all the officials are all from Edinburgh or something. So it is difficult, and then you have the issues, well, then we're sending referees up from England to Scotland, and then you've got people complaining, well, that's ridiculous. It's not easy. I don't think we have a brilliant geographical spread of officials relative to where the teams are. We're trying to do something about that. We spend quite a bit of time at the board meeting saying, right, well, now we need to make sure that at least in every sort of geographical region, we've got a couple of guys who could officiate or be a linesman at the same time as just finding the people. And it's not an easy situation to solve.
And interestingly on this weekend, I don't know how many of you know this, we're going to say goodbye to one of our most experienced officials in Lee Young, who's going to retire. He's been doing this for 24 years. I think he's 38 now. He did his first Wembley final as a 16-year-old. So you get an idea of what these guys give. In the end, he's a dad of 2. And he's given every Saturday, Sunday, and a whole host of midweeks, where he's left at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and then he's gone to work at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning and not seen his family in between. And when he looks at his bank balance every month, there ain't an awful lot there that makes him feel like it's worth the time. And that's, again, always going to be the problem, isn't it? Until you can afford to throw down a salary that would match a job, it's going to be very difficult for the Elite League to be able to say, well, hang on a second, we need to make you completely accountable because this is the only thing that you do in your life. And for the players, or for the officials, should I say, for them to carry on going. Because when do you want the officials? Probably when they're in their mid to late 30s, going through to their mid to late 40s, when they've got the experience, and when they get gobby player coming up or gobby coach coming up, they've got the confidence just to say, thanks very much, I'll deal with you later.
And Seth, you know what, like, some leagues around Europe are trying to pinch our officials. Like that. So Neil made a good point, I think it was last year at the board meeting. He said, realize this, the IIHF, the international hockey world, whether it's the IIHF leagues in North America, have more respect for our referees than they do for our league. Because our referees will ref in the top world championship or one underneath, whereas our GB program or our league ranking as far as leagues worldwide is far, far lower than where the referees level is. So don't think that this is a UK only problem. This forum could be happening in Austria and Germany, and the number one topic is always officials, right? But like, I know a couple officials, 2 officials, and I'm not going to name names. They have contract offers for far more money than they could make to go referee in Denmark, because Denmark's like, our officials are crap. We need to improve it, and they're turning here. So, and like, I mean, it's not. These are like jobs that are full-paying jobs, and Denmark have realized, and Denmark's a league that relies on sponsorship much more than bums on seats like we do, and they've said that they have to invest in referees, and they're setting aside X amount of thousands of pounds, or hundreds of thousands of pounds, to invest in officials, to go around and cherry pick 3 or 4 new officials to improve it.
Let's move on. New topic, sir, at the back there.
Graham Thompson, Braehead Clan fan. The conference system, we've only got 45 minutes, so I thought we might as well squeeze this one in. As the league have just been, I've just missed out on some fairly major fallout, just a point, which happens to be the same point that the Clan have missed out in the league on. Has the conference system run its course? Speaking as a Clan fan, I would prefer us to be playing more games against the likes of Steelers and Panthers and Giants. And with the greatest respect to Steve, not Dundee Stars and Edinburgh Capitals every week. Has the system run its course? Is there a look to change the system? Because there certainly seems to be quite a lot of fixture fatigue coming in now. And Todd, as you said yourself, if Clan had won the league, there would probably been a fair deal of fallout from that. Well, so is there any changes afoot?
Like this is another thing we talk about a lot, and the conference system was brought in. I think we all have our own opinions on it, so I'll let the other guys talk too. The conference system was brought in to close the gap between top teams and bottom teams, because at the time there was always, it'd be like Nottingham, Sheffield, Belfast, bunch of points, Cardiff, Coventry, bunch of points, Hull, Edinburgh, Fife, Dundee, and not necessarily in that order. Sorry, Steve.
That's okay.
But
what's this season?
But you know what I mean, right? Like, there was a huge gap, and like there was years where Sheffield would go into they went into Fife, the first year Fife were in the league, 18-1, 13-2, all these like blowout scores, and you're like, that's not good. It's not good for Fife's business. It's actually not good for Sheffield's business, and it certainly isn't for the league. So we put this conference system in. All of a sudden, Dundee and Fife are getting huge crowds against each other, local rivalries. They're playing each other 4 times instead of 3, and then they're playing maybe a preseason as well. If you looked at the teams on a business standpoint, every team's crowds went up, every team's. And maybe the one exception might be Hull, but they got a bit compensated to be in that other conference. And all the big teams were playing the big teams more, so it made it more competitive against that, less teams against the teams that maybe they were getting extra points on or kicking the crap out of. The Scottish teams, the other conference were playing more against each other, saving money on travel, but also getting bigger crowds. Like, I mean, I don't think Steve would want to change it purely on a financial point of view, but I'll let him comment. But from a Cardiff standpoint, I really like the conference system. I think and Neil brought up, and I don't know if he wants to touch on, I think we might need to adjust the number of games. So it's and people would say, like, how do you play an odd number of games? But maybe going seven games against your own conference, 5 against the other, instead of 8 and 4. And you just, one year you play 3 of the teams home and away 3 times, and the next year you play them 4 times, or whatever it is. And we work out that system because every other league in the world doesn't care about the conference system. They love it because they do it by locality, because the league isn't the number 1 trophy. Our league is the only league in the world where the champion is the league winner. If you eliminate that, no one would complain. If it was win your conference, you're the top seed for your playoff position, and playoffs are 2 months, and it's three series of 7 games, then the conference system, the argument's mute. You don't even argue about it. It's because the league is the champion, and that's the argument about 4th lines and developing British talent. Coaches are here 2 or 3 years. They want to win. They're not here to develop British talent. I hate to say it, because they want to move on. They want to maybe they want to win. And
they want to keep their job.
Yeah.
More importantly.
Yeah.
Or get a better job.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Neil, Steve should comment on the conference system as well.
Steve?
Has the conference run its course? Definitely not. I'll take you to a board meeting before the conference system came in, and we would meet for a whole day, which we always do. The first 4 hours would be taken up with clubs and financial difficulties and problems. Clubs may be struggling to get through the season. Clubs have fallen out of the Elite League. We've came into the Elite League. There's lots of clubs fell out because of financial restraints and the conditions. The travelling was too much for clubs when we're the most northern club, Cardiff are the most southern club. The travelling, if you play each other more often, is horrendous on the players for fatigue purposes. But the main thing is we've now built good rivalries within our conferences. Braehead came second this year. We were third in the league last year. We had a fantastic season. We're now building better crowds against all the teams. But another good thing that happens is because we're only playing the teams from the Southern Conference twice in the season, before no fans would come to Dundee. Now every team for one of the games brings 200 or 300 fans to Dundee. So the whole system works really well. I know you probably want to see Steelers probably more often, and you know that's what it is for you guys right at this moment in time. That might not be the case going forward. But we've now built a league where everybody is sustainable, and that wasn't happening before, because you had teams like Basingstoke falling out, Newcastle fell out, Manchester fell out. The teams that have came into the league haven't fallen out, they've stuck with the league. And that can only be good for going forward. I mean, this is the first weekend there's been a sellout here, is it? That speaks to me that we're doing the right thing. So if we're doing it that way and it's working, the teams are all sticking together, why would you want to change it?
Neil?
And I think Todd's point's really right. Until we get away from the league being the main thing, because the main thing should be this playoff weekend. We should be vying to get to this weekend. Okay, you win your league or your conference. It was great for us to win the conference last year. Great for the fans, and it gives teams like us a chance of winning something. I mean, we would love to be at this event this weekend. Maybe in the future we'll all be. But we actually won a trophy last year, and that's the first thing we've won in the Elite League era. So I just think it's the best thing we can do to keep it going.
Neil?
I've got very mixed views on this conference. I mean, when it came in, I've got to say that both Nottingham and Braehead were very against it. In fact, we were the only two teams against the system when it was introduced, because I am uncomfortable from a sporting point of view. I think, though, the fact that we've got this kind of stability in the league is a real plus that allows us to sort of have this conversation about the negatives. I personally would like to see us slightly tweak it now. We discussed it, in fact, at some length at the last board meeting, and we sort of decided to sort of just defer the decision because some of the clubs had already gone on sale with their season tickets, and we thought it wasn't right to start changing maybe the structure of the league yet, and maybe it was better to sort of give people maybe some further discuss the ramifications and give some notice. I would say there are two issues I'm uncomfortable with the conference system. First of all, in my mind, Belfast are clearly geographically in the wrong conference. Number one. I can see the argument why they don't want to move conference, and I can also see a slight benefit for Hull being in a conference that maybe could give them better chances of winning games as well, but they're probably, I can't speak for Bobby, but I think they would probably be more comfortable in the other conference as well. So I think that quite clearly is wrong. Just when you look at a map, it doesn't make any sense. And I think coupled with that would probably be, I quite like the idea of going to 7 and 5. It still would hopefully wouldn't really create much of an issue. It would give a 53 game season. I mean, just so we understand, this is what we discuss at some length. It would be, you would play the teams in your own conference 7 times, and then you would play the teams in the other conference 5 times. And you would simply, once a year, you would have one game where you were just away, and then you'd reverse the fixture the following year. So hypothetically, if it was Nottingham, Sheffield, we'd play 3 home, 3 away. Then one year we'd be playing away at Sheffield, and the next year you're playing home at Sheffield for your 7th game. And so everything just reverses every 2 years. Then every 2 years you'd have you change it.
Could have another trophy.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Exactly. I think that would be slightly fairer in terms of the league. I think it wouldn't be such a huge change that it would hopefully affect the clubs fiscally. I think if we did it at the same time as doing it with Belfast, so hopefully we'd need to get them on board, then I think it would be quite good. It would even the conferences up. That's what I would like to. I would like to see for the season 16-17 that system in place with Belfast and the other conference, 5 and 7 games. It's a 53 game season. I think that would be nice to see how it goes. If it didn't work, we could go back to 8 and 4. I mean, it's
but hang on a second. What about expansion?
Yeah, well, obviously, if we have that's another. Obviously, the conference system also only works with even numbers of teams. That's another point. or at least it generally only works with even number teams. You can sort of play around with it.
But what about expansion? How far away?
The great thing about hockey is it always changes, right?
Yeah.
Right. So if there's teams wanting to join the league, they would apply to join the league. There's no way we're going to. If a team comes with the right credentials, they've got the right fan base, the pass all the things they've got to pass, there's no way any team's not going to get allowed into the league. Then we would review the situation then. Because if it was a single team, the whole conference system might have to be
thrown up in the air,
well, restructured or whatever we have to do.
But I suppose the bigger question, and there are lots of them in this pile of papers, what's going on with expansion? You know, we've heard of this London franchise that may be happening at some point in the future. Let's nail it down. What's the situation? What's the timeline?
I would be very, very confident that very shortly we'll be announcing that there'll be a new team joining the league, but it won't be joining to 2017-18. So we've got at least 2 more years of
10 teams.
Of 10 teams. You know, there may be other teams knocking around wanting to join. In fact, you know, there are other teams knocking around wanting to join, but it has to be, I think, the right team. And I think what we've learned as a league, definitely going forward, is that it has to be a team that can sort of sustain itself on the basis of fans. We're not interested in a team that could join the league that might just be able to put a good team on the ice but not have a fan sustainable business, because we all realise that if we can have a team with, and I'd say the target is a team that maybe with a bit of wind behind it can have a sort of a couple thousand fans, let's say, as a sort of
a starting point
where they can get to. Obviously we've got teams that don't have that, but there's hoping they could get to that. Then with a bit of luck, that sort of team would generate away fans, there'd be interest, there'd be fans at this playoff final. It will be a team that you could at least hopefully be able to compete fiscally in games. And that obviously will affect the conference thing. I can't see, going back to the conference specific question, like I said, I'd like to see the season after next. If it was me, you know, obviously we have to all agree on it, especially teams in conference. I'd like to see Belfast in the other conference, swapping with Hull, 7 games, 7 and 5, 53 game season. I think it would be interesting. Bit of a change.
Morning, gents. Jamie Campbell, a Braehead fan. Just really just an extension of Seth's question about expansion. What do you think is the optimum number of teams in the league, and how many markets do you think are available to expand into?
I think if we could have 12 solid businesses, 12 is a good number. I mean, it's hard to ever say a number. If all of a sudden there's 14 teams that we thought could do it, 14 is a good number. It's in the UK. It's all down to facilities, and you know, like people like, oh, this, you know, there's a gentleman in Telford that can afford to be in our league, but Telford don't have the facilities, and maybe one day they will. Or, you know, I think you know, like back in the Super League days, when a new facility was being built, they had a guy that went to that before it was being built to say, hey, are you going to put an ice pad in? Are you interested in getting into the top league in the UK? Whereas now when rinks are being built that are of a size that could be a Nottingham or be a Sheffield or be a Belfast, no one's going and talking to them, you know, like when they're being built. Like I don't know if when Liverpool was built or when Leeds was built, if they said, hey, do you want to, you know, is anyone there interested in an ice hockey team? It's tough because Neil basically built Braehead from scratch. I know they had a history of it, but like what a success story that's been. But you had a facility already, you know? And but I think it's all down to that, because like we're getting to the point where maybe you get a team that comes in and then maybe Hull says, hey, I don't know if we can compete anymore. Or maybe Hull says, hey, the council are going to build us a new rink. I think it comes down to facilities. For us, we're very lucky in Cardiff, we're getting a new facility. But we couldn't sustain what we're in. You know, it's just not feasible. It's been 9 years in that little tent, and you just can't do it. And that's what Manchester, I don't think they could jump up to our league again because the facilities, and Telford, until they get a better facility, I don't think they can do it either.
I think 12's a good number. 12 works well. Taking on board a number of clubs who have, without doubt, got very, very valid argument to keep some kind of a conference system, even if it's just to do with it's local rivalries, it's to do with travel. You know, there are issues. I mean, you imagine the logistics of getting Fife to London and then literally playing the next day back in Fife. I mean, this is not straightforward stuff.
Dundee's further, by the way.
Dundee, sorry. Look, if you had 12 teams, you'd have a 3 and 2 system, which would give you a 54 game system. So you'd have 3 home, 3 away in your own conference, 2 home, 2 away. The other conference would be a bit fairer. 54 games. That's I think what we're aiming at. If you just look at sort of the size of the country, 65 million people in the UK. How many can we realistically support? I mean, look how big a sport rugby is. They haven't got a lot more teams in their one league. They're one, in the England that is. In England they've got a professional league with I think it's 12 teams. And even if you look at the NHL, there's only 23 teams in the United States in the NHL for 330 million people. So where realistically we go, I would say realistically 12 is the number. That would probably be there's the 4 Scottish. Yeah. Maybe there could be a 5th Scottish. I know there's obviously one other potential city.
There's potential for Aberdeen to come in the league going forward. It all depends on what their business is, and Todd's right, what the facilities they've got. I mean, Telford's a classic example where they've got a sugar daddy at the moment. If he ever pulled out and he joined the elite league, they couldn't have sustained themselves. So that's what I'm saying. It all depends on how they come forward to us, what business plan they put forward to be part of the league and to sustain their being part of the league. Then we would take it from there. But is there an optimum number? It'd be great if we can get a league where you had relegation and promotion. You know what I mean? But that's probably never going to happen.
Another question, got loads of them here. Gentleman in the blue here, and then we'll go to the Giants fan a little further back.
Hello, it's David Clark. I'm a Nottingham Panthers supporter. Just a question around the European Games. Do the owners and GMs see the European Games being the future of the sport, or is the domestic fixtures remain a priority?
Neil, you've had experience of this?
The domestic for sure is a priority, without a shadow of doubt. For a couple, first of all, I think the structure's really good as it is. I think it's quite exciting. We've got a league with, at the moment, 2 teams going in the CHL. That won't necessarily stay like that, just so people know, because at the moment, the team with the worst results ends up with 1 place. We actually had marginally better results than France this year. So France ended up with 1 place in the CHL and GB ended up with 2. But next year that could change and we could end up back at 1. So we've got a good structure there. We've got, I think, a very good structure that the winner effectively, if Coventry win today, they get into the Continental Cup. If Coventry lose today, Cardiff go into the Continental Cup because they're 3rd in the league. In subsequent years, that might change to the team that's 2nd in the league. So we'd have it, if we only had 1 place in the CHL. And we're never going to get far enough in the CHL. Let's be honest, we're never going to get anywhere in the CHL. But what could we hope for? You win the odd game. Maybe next year, the year after, you could possibly get into the group stage, the last 32. If you come in the top 2 out the group of 3 now in the CHL, you get into the last 32. That's a reasonable target, but not until the sport changed dramatically in terms of our budgets would the Champions Hockey League be anything other than a minor distraction. I think it's quite nice. I think we've got it really good. It's a few extra games. It's interesting for the fans. You got a chance of winning the odd game. The domestic league, it's well fun. I think without a shadow of a doubt, what are the games that our fans really enjoy? They're the big domestic games by a mile, and I think that's the same in other sports. Even in the Premiership, where I know the Champions League is obviously a lot of money, all that, but you probably ask a fan, my team Spurs, rarely in the Champions League, but if you ask them what's their big game this season, it's Arsenal. You ask the Man U fan, it's probably Liverpool. I don't think that's going to change, and that isn't going to change, I'm sure, in British ice hockey. There's a long tradition in this sport, and I don't think that's going to change at all.
Yes, sir. You turned off, turned on?
I'm Brian Sloan, Belfast Giants fan. Playoffs are always in Nottingham. Is it time to move it around the country a bit, even if the winning team get to host it, or a neutral venue, or something different? I think, personally, coming to Nottingham the last 12, 14 years, it's getting a wee bit stale. So when it's come to the same city, is it time to start moving around?
Todd?
The options are limited because, first of all, it works here. And I think if we were sitting here, if we did a fan forum 3 years ago, I'd be more of an advocate because Nottingham had won 3 or 4 in a row, I think. I don't know. And for as a team coming in when the Panthers were doing well, or when they had an off year, an off being like a 4th place finish, and they were constantly winning the playoffs because it's a home ice advantage for them, right? But the last couple of years they haven't got here, and you realize it's a great event even if the Panthers aren't here. We used to really think, well, the Panthers have to be here to sell out, whereas this year we have our biggest ticket sales ever and the Panthers aren't here. The logical choice, we did the Continental Cup in Sheffield, real big success.
Challenge Cup.
What did I call it?
Continental Cup.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You're a
sorry,
question
challenge.
behind it, sorry. I'll catch you up.
I was a Freudian slip.
Yeah, I fell asleep there for a minute. Challenge Cup.
That's the one, yeah.
Challenge Cup. We did the Challenge Cup in Sheffield. It was a very, very big success, but Sheffield were in it, right? And what if the Challenge Cup final had been Braehead and Coventry? Would you have gotten the same crowd? I don't know if you would have. And everyone thinks like when I was in Belfast, and Mark Brooks is here from Belfast, Belfast is a great option, but would you get 3,000 people traveling to Belfast? Logistically, like think about Easter weekend. Could 3,000 people find their way to Belfast? And 3,000, like I know the fan base. Belfast has a diehard fan base, but the core fan base of Belfast fans, 2,500, 3,000, right? So to fill so call it 3,500 people have to find their way over. And there's boats, but a boat holds 300 people, and logistically, it's a lot easier to be centralized in the UK, and everyone can drive to it. And it's a pain in the butt for Belfast, for the team, for the fans to always be the ones that have to travel, but it's the best option, and it's a great facility, and it's central, and there's hotels all around within walking distance. It really, really does work,
It's a good city as well. It's a good city to hold it, just for the fans to come and visit. But it's the sellout for the first time for a while, is it?
Yeah.
So that tells me that it works here, and it is the National Ice Centre, so it really should be holding the main event of the season for the top league in the country. And it's a fantastic facility. And we did discuss Belfast holding it, but then it was, how does everyone get there? And that is the problem with holding it in Belfast.
Yeah, I mean,
if you hold it in Sheffield, it's a big arena, it probably work there as well, but this is the National Ice Centre, and it definitely works here, because every year it's well attended. And what was fantastic for me is here, and there was 1,500 tickets on eBay on Monday from Nottingham fans, but when yesterday in the arena, every Nottingham seat was full. So that was obviously a myth. The Nottingham fans support it whether they're in the finals or not, and that's been a great thing for me. I'm not sure how many other clubs would support it as well as that if their team weren't here, you know what I mean? Because the turnout's been fantastic.
Yeah, I just to give you an example of the logistical difficulty, I can tell you this as the owner of the Panthers. We had our flights held because we thought we were going to get Belfast in there's chances playing Belfast in the quarterfinals. Now we couldn't get our whole team on there was no aeroplane. We were working out how we were going to get our team to Belfast to play a playoff game, because that's what we thought. We were going Friday to Belfast to play a game, and then Saturday in Nottingham. It's exceedingly complicated, to get flights, and we were holding flights. We ended up we had our team on 2 different flights because you couldn't get 26 seats together on one aeroplane. They're not just waiting for us to turn up. I mean, the logistical difficulties would be immense for the fact that 3 teams, possibly 4 teams, would actually have to get themselves to Belfast. They wouldn't
5 days notice.
Yeah, they wouldn't
know. The biggest problem.
Yeah.
We've been organising with Steve, just getting his team here this weekend. That is a logistical nightmare in itself. Just getting Belfast to come to Nottingham. They had to fly in on Friday. Their flight got delayed.
Well, we got Belfast in the playoffs, and
how did you get that?
We had to bus to Manchester. So we bussed to Manchester in traffic. It took us 5 hours. We barely made the flight. We had to take 2 different flights back and 2 different bus companies back because we couldn't get them all on the bus on the same flight back. The costs were ridiculous. Like we spent, if we'd played anyone else, I think the total cost of our trip to Belfast to play one game was about £7,000. Yeah. And usually when you have a plan, when when you're playing them throughout the year, it's not near that because you can book your flights in advance. We have a deal with Flybe, all that kind of stuff. But last minute, it just killed us. Absolutely killed us.
What about, though, there are some great arenas that aren't used for hockey right now that have been used for hockey in the past?
Manchester.
There's Manchester, there's Wembley, there's options in both of those where ice can be put down. Are they options?
I think when London comes in, I think things might be different, but in the current situation, it's Sheffield or Nottingham. And like maybe you try it in Sheffield, but that's why we did the Challenge Cup there.
Why though? Why couldn't?
Well, you can hold on. We could have conceptually, and at the moment Sheffield, I think, is a really good place for the cup final. It works very well as a venue. You've got excellent screen facilities. You've got good places to eat, park. It works really well. Obviously, in the past, we had that cup final years ago.
In
Belfast. One that
Belfast.
preceded it. The last one was Belfast Air.
Sheffield.
And was it Belfast Sheffield? No, I think
it was Sheffield Air.
Then after that, it was Air Belfast.
Yeah, no, it was and I remember that game, which Air won, and it was a sellout crowd. You know, back in Belfast, I think it was the last grandstand game or whatever of a cup final. So I think Belfast would be a good place for a one-off cup final. Like, we know the dates, we know already the date. It's Sunday, March the 6th. I think just want to put your diary. That's if it's the 6th or the 5th. That's the date of next year's cup final in Sheffield. But we could plan for Belfast in the future, certainly for a cup final. The other venue, just most of them don't have a permanent ice pads in. In fact, none of them do. The O2 does in London, but Manchester doesn't anymore, nor does Newcastle. They're not functioning. So the logistics of suddenly getting ice down, it's not so straightforward. You'd have to book a venue literally for a week, at whatever the cost of hire is for a minimum of a week. Then there'd be the days at the end to get rid of the ice. It's quite a busy time of year, this, for some of the venues for, concerts and stuff. We're not yet into the quiet sort of stage. So it would be cost prohibitive. And then I'm also thinking about fans. One of the extra great things about Nottingham, for the exception of Belfast fans, is, you can drive here. You virtually could drive here on Saturday morning if you had to get here for the first game, because we bear that in mind when we time the games. We know that fans could drive here. There's a plethora of hotels that you can stay in that are pretty competitively priced in Nottingham. So there's lots of hotel rooms. Hopefully most people are paying, let's say, less than £100 a night for, twin rooms. At least it makes it kind of an affordable weekend. You buy the ticket, you can stay one night. The game, the final finishes normally by 6:30, 7. You can be home. If it wasn't Easter, you could be at work on Monday. The dynamics works, we think, very well for the vast majority of fans, unfortunately, other than Belfast. Yeah,
most Belfast fans.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know. I totally understand. And you know what? I'm not in the slightest, because when it's always been difficult and very expensive for Belfast fans to get here, and hopefully, obviously, it wasn't the case. But some of their Celtic brothers are there to support them as well in the games here. So at least they're not on their own now, sort of in the sort of the arena. Because in the past they used to be just the Belfast fans, no one else. Now they got. I think we appreciate that for Belfast fans, it's not great, and we don't have a high expectation of Belfast, and I think it's marvellous that so many fans do come, because it is a bloody expensive weekend, and they've come when the team's not been here as well.
I suppose though, if you do look at the history of British hockey, it was always at Wembley, then it was at Manchester. It would be more expensive if they had anything at Wembley. You say £1,000, that would be the hotel rooms for 2 nights, and that's that. It's incredibly expensive. Who else have got questions? At the back there, then we'll come to the gentleman in the Braehead shirt, and then we'll head along this row. We are starting to run out of time. Mitch, how much longer have we got? 10 minutes? We've got 10 minutes, so let's make these as quick fire as possible.
We don't mind saying I don't really want to catch that third and fourth.
Not too long.
That'll eliminate a lot of the questions.
And Todd Kelman just gives us the biggest exclusive of the weekend.
Yes.
Hi, Steve Talbini from Edinburgh. I started watching ice hockey far too long ago, but over the years the trend I see is fewer and fewer British players at the top level. Is there a place for British players in British ice hockey? And if so, how can you make it improve?
Great question.
Very
Steve.
difficult question to answer, and a good question. I think if you base your league on that it's predominantly imported players from North America, some from Europe, of course it's going to be difficult for the British players. But I think the fans want to see hockey played at a really high level in this country. You all pay good money to watch the teams, so you're expecting the best that the clubs can put on for you. And it's a really hard one to answer. If the British players are good enough, they'll play. And it's bringing them forward. That is the really difficult part of it, isn't it? I don't know the answer. I mean, we try and bring local guys into our team, you know what I mean? Predominantly guys that have come through our junior set, which we set up when we started the Stars in 2001. I mean, we've got under 10s right through. And even after 15 years, the amount of guys that can actually come and play, I think Sam McCluskey and John Dolan are the only two that have really came through that can play at this level. And that's after 15 years of a junior development system. So is that the way? I don't know. It's really a difficult question to answer. And while we keep increasing import quotas in the teams, the fans get a better quality game without a doubt, but the British players find it harder and they get squeezed a bit more for ice time. And it is something that we as a league have got to decide, what product do we want to put on ice? Do we want to put a British product on ice, or do we want to put the ice hockey product on ice? And I think the fans, the way you turn out the numbers you do, are answering the question. They want to see the best ice hockey that we as clubs can put on the ice.
Neil?
And for a lot of British kids, they're getting a really good opportunity. There's Dundee guys that went down playing the EPL, and they couldn't even get into our team. So there is an avenue for British players. It's probably no at the top level in our league. For a lot of them anyway. I mean, there is a lot of good British players in the league, but it's just, if you want to see a totally British league, I'm not sure all the fans want that.
Steve, thank you. Neil?
Yeah, I agree with Steve, but I think we're, like, putting my Braehead at Nottingham hat on, I'd say we're in the, moving on from that, maybe this is an exclusive, you know, we're going to be both teams playing 4-line hockey next season. We're going to be recruiting more Brits than we've ever recruited in our teams, both of them. You know, we're looking for, you know, the import limit's going up to 13. We're looking to have 22 players. That means we need 9 Brits. So I think there's going to be more opportunity for British players in the league next year than there will ever be. There are now 10 teams. I mean, obviously it's also a product of the number of teams. We're going to have 10 teams. I think there's going to be probably at least 4 or 5 teams playing 4-line hockey next year, all of whom will require 9 Brits. That's 45, okay? You're going to have, you know, there are no teams not playing at least 3-line hockey, so all of them are going to need half a dozen Brits. Then you've got, obviously, a few things with injuries. We know that, you know, as we've learned our lesson also with the suspensions, it means the current rules, the way they're set up, you need a few more Brits because, you know, you can use them to help get you up the numbers if necessary, if you haven't got if you've got a player suspended. So I would say that the opportunities for British players have never been greater. Never been greater in the last sort of, the spectrum probably of the last, I've been around since 97, you know, in the last 17 or 18 years. Why we're maybe not getting some British players at the highest level, I think that's, there's a couple things of that. I don't know much about, I'm not involved with coaching of the younger players. There may be a little bit of issue, I think, with who's coaching players, how much ice time they're obviously getting at younger ages. I'm a little bit concerned that we don't have enough British players going abroad when they're getting maybe to the levels. I think part of that has been our problem. I think the opposite with the import rule. I think the fewer imports you have, the more clubs keep British players in Britain and they don't go abroad. I think it has the complete opposite effect to the way people think. I think the more imports we have, the happier we will be to let British players go abroad. Young players, they will get better. They may or may not come back. But I'm just talking from our clubs. If we've now got more imports, you know, if a British player wants to go abroad, which is probably good for him, playing, you know, some of the other leagues, it won't matter so much, so we won't actually bust the gut so hard to keep him. That actually would be good for British players. You know, I think that's what needs to happen. Go abroad, have a few years, come back, and I can see that happening right across the league. So I'm quite bullish for the prospects for British players, new coach, lots of young players in the GB team. I think it's hopefully good.
Happy with that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why you're on that basis. Why have an import limit at all?
There you go. Why have an import limit at all?
How many British players?
Well,
do you think, how many British players do you think would play in our league if there was no import limit? But it's got to be affordable as well. It's got to be an affordable product for the teams.
I would say the answer to that question is quite clearly we have a disparity in the league of revenues. You know, there are some clubs, you know, Nottingham, who can play in front of 7,000 people one day, and there are other clubs, Hull, who have a capacity of, you know, 20% of that capacity. So I think we all understand that, you know, yes, it might suit a couple of clubs if there was, you know, unlimited imports, but going back, like what Todd was saying at the start about some of the results at the very start, like, you know, the Sheffield 5, right, none of us want to get to that scenario where we get huge disparity between scores. And at the moment, there's a conceptual feeling that by having some sort of limit a little bit on the imports does sort of help equalise it, because, you know, it's a bit like the argument, it's the same argument actually for the suspension rule. That's the argument put, you know, if you lose an import, well, if we could just replace an import, the big clubs, they'd have a player suspended, you know, Nottingham would just have another player, it wouldn't be fair. That's sort of the argument, like, on that rule. I think that this gradual increase, which is going to be, hopefully, I think it's going to be, you know, it's 13 next year, it's 14 the year after, then it's kind of capped, that's it. I would very much hope that all of us clubs could find 8 good British players in the future, and there will be hopefully at least 80 good British players in our league, which would be great.
And I suppose the other point, it's a limit rather than at the other end where you have to have all of these players. If you had 22 British players that were every bit as good as those, you could very easily, if you could afford it, sign them all. I think the affording it bit might be the most tricky part of that. Let's get a question from the gentleman in the clan shirt, then we'll come down here onto the second row. We're going to give it a little bit more time. I appreciate if any of you do want to leave, do feel free, but we will carry on taking questions while the guys are still game.
Hi, I'm Andy Wallace, obviously a Braehead clan fan, and I've got a question in terms of youth development, whether something similar to what they have in the US in terms of the draft system. So like the lower finishing teams could possibly have a pick of the best Brit players that are coming through the youth leagues of the EPL, if that would be feasible to have in this league.
The problem with any sort of draft system, we're running before we can walk. The EPL, think of yourself as a British player. You can play, if you're an up and coming British player, you can make more money and work a side job or go to school and train at night and play in the EPL and have a nice little career in there and probably get paid more. It's whether you want to compete and play in the top level, but there's no point in drafting the reason why a draft works in North America is because, you know, barring different cities, they're all on equal wages. You're going to be a millionaire if you get drafted. So if you get drafted by Calgary, it's not that different between getting drafted to Florida, even though Florida's sunnier and might be a better place to live. Whereas here, like, so let's say the top prospect who lives locally, he's an hour from where his parents live, they live in Nottingham, he can play for the Panthers, but you put it in a draft system, he gets drafted by Edinburgh. And he goes to Edinburgh and doesn't get what he living by his family. There's so many aspects. The way it works here, I don't think a draft would ever work in this country. It just wouldn't.
No.
But we did introduce, I seem to remember a few years ago, which I sort of liked but it never worked, we actually introduced an extra import for the teams that missed the playoffs. And the problem, which I think we had it...
we had 12, 11, 10.
Yeah, depending where you finished in the league, it actually...
the expansion teams got an extra import. When we joined, we were allowed an extra import to help us, which worked for the season, but then we dropped it where everyone was the same. Once Fife Dundee had bedded into the league, and Braehead in fact as well, that's when it tailed off again and it was all level across. But for our league to start drafting players, I just think it wouldn't work. We're not that far advanced in this country yet. Until such time as we do become on a level with the North Americans, I don't think it would work.
But we did also have, I'm pretty sure, Steve, we also had, separate than that, we had a system where if you missed the bottom two, I think it was, in the league, got an extra import. Yeah. I can't remember whether there was another tier of it. I quite like that idea as it happens. The problem is that it tends to be the teams at the bottom don't even have the maximum imports they could have anyway. So it was like a bit of a waste of time because teams that could have had 10 imports could have had 11 imports, ended up 7 imports. So, but maybe that might change. I mean, I quite like that as an equalisation process because it's the nearest we might get to sort of some.
I suppose as well, the other thing, you know, financially, if you're comparing, if you've got £500 to spend and you've got the comparable British player and the comparable North American player, I would imagine, and I'll let Todd answer this, what you could get, points per game, influence on the game, is very, very different.
Well, like, it's a great way to put it because the way I always say that, I'm like, the best British players, all the British players that have done really, really well, have spent time in Canada. Most of them, you know, like not you can pick out examples that haven't, but like when I went through my teams, I always be like, I didn't know, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I went and lived in America for 4 years, or I went and, you know, my parents sent me to a school there, or whatever it was, and you're absolutely right. Like I know if could I go out and find what Davy Phillips makes in Belfast? Could you go find a defenseman that played in the East Coast or American League and get a better defenseman? Yes, you could. No offense to Davy Phillips, but it's just, we grew up in Canada playing 80 games a year from the time we were 5 years old, training 3 times a week on the ice with maybe pro hockey players teaching us. We've all watched it, we've all lived and breathed it, and we are, chances are you've got a talent pool of 100,000 guys in North America versus 60 good players here. So like when a guy here gets good, when Robert Dowd is as gifted as he is, as talented as he is, or David Clark, or Stephen Murphy, they're an anomaly. Like you know, like they're just really naturally talented, and I can't imagine what they could have done if they grew up in North America. You know, it's just there's just so much. It's like football. Like when you go, or rugby's a better example. Rugby in Canada is kind of getting bigger, and all the rugby coaches are guys that played a little bit of rugby here. They might have just played like a bit of high school rugby or whatever it is, or like, you know, but over there, they're the rugby coaches. They're the ones playing on the teams there because they've done it their whole life. They're just better than us, you know?
Yes, sir.
John Williams from Cardiff Devils. I'll ask a question if I may in a second, but go back to the point about the import limit going up to 14 again next year.
13.
You said it was 14 next year after
13
that? Oh, 13 and 40, yeah. Okay, you're ahead of myself. Are we not being a bit naive saying, you know, you'll get 9 British players alongside that will play regularly? Super League killed British players off. And that's what, 20 years ago, you saw it happen for yourself firsthand. You know, guys who were top-end British players that could command whatever, you know, salary they wanted to, they got tossed aside. The GB national team obviously suffered because of it. It got full of Canadians that weren't really British. You know, and as a British person, I'd rather watch British guys playing for GB. If they qualify via residency, fair enough, you know. But the national team suffered because the Super League basically sort of lost the British talent from the league completely. So if we go up to 14 imports within the next 2 years, the British guys won't get a look in. It's okay, you can get 9 British guys maybe who will want to play here and will make ice time. Steve couldn't go and recruit British players alongside 14 imports. Yeah. So where these guys are going to fit in, that's going to long-term keep the GB team, you know, competitive.
I suppose this leads to a slightly bigger question as well, is actually fundamentally, isn't the Elite League against the development of the British national team?
If we're going to get into a discussion about, you know, who can play for different nations, I mean, this is a big sporting topic. I mean, you obviously, you know, the Welsh rugby team used to be, I'm familiar with at least a few, you know, they had their own issues with playing New Zealanders who didn't qualify for visas, and then discovering, you know, the English cricket teams full of South Africans, the English current rugby teams full of people. I'm sure the Welsh, I don't follow it close, I bet the Welsh rugby team the Scottish rugby team certainly is full of people of, let's just say, you know, you might not say they're Scottish. I think that's just the way the country's going. For a start, we're not a development league. You know, we're a professional league trying to put out a good product and attract fans. Secondly, you know, the current laws of the country, just the way this arena functions, you know, if you ask the people running this arena or whatever business you worked in to, you know, cease employing anyone who maybe wasn't born in Cardiff or Wales or whatever, they'd fold up. It's you know, this arena is full of EU staff. Every single building we go into, every single restaurant we go to. So I don't have, I must say, me conceptually, I don't have any problem at all about the discussion. Quite happy to have it. And in fact, I understand it. I'm quite in favour of it, of opening it up. Anyone who's allowed to work here, EU, fine. There's a little bit of a different discussion about people requiring work permits, which is fair game. You know, we are subject to, it used to be called the border agency, I don't know what it's called now exactly.
UKBA.
Still called UKBA. We're subject to that. They tell us, in fact, what the rules are. We have to comply, work permits, visas, all cost money, there's no doubt about it. We're all much happier if a Great Brit turns up. I think that the way players in any get to any level in any sport, you know, in fact, it's the same, and the Ireland Premiership goes the same way, is, you know, you're a good young British player, you'll start in Nottingham on the 4th line, here you'll get better, you'll be on the 3rd line, you'll get even better, you'll become on the 2nd line, you'll play with better players, you'll become a better player. I think that's the argument. I think we've lost track a bit of how you become a better British player. I think British players are going to become much better because they're going to be playing with better players in more competitive leagues, and hopefully we will find 1 or 2 good players. I think the only issue I've actually got, I think there is a bit of an issue, is actually net minding, because net minding is actually a little bit more difficult, because I can understand why teams actually might decide they don't really want to risk a British guy at all being the number 1 or the number 2, and that's an issue. But on the other hand, they can then play in the league below. I mean, Stevie Lyle's in the league below now. They can come up. It's the same, I suppose. It's the same in football. Now, I've seen the stats on football, and in fact, they're very interesting stats, because if you actually look at the number of I'm talking now about English players. The number of English players in the Premiership is actually higher now. They did a stat going back about 20 or 30 years to how many English players, were in the Division 1, and it's actually a higher number than it is today. Because in those days, we used to think that Scottish players, Welsh players, Irish players were effectively English, as if all of a sudden, you know, it was a British thing. So, I don't know enough really about some of how the stats work, but I'm pretty confident we get good product on the ice, get a good number of fans watching, we get more British players into the game, they're going to come through. I would hope that with the right coaching, the British team will prosper. I think the opposite would happen. Personally, I think we would have a far worse national team if we had went back to the old, 2 import rule or whatever they
I'm not so sure I agree with you on that. I just think that you just do the numbers. If you've got 40 imports, you've got a goalie, you've got 4D, you've got 9 forwards. Right, there's 3-line hockey for you right away. And when the games get tough, and it's a winner-takes-all situation, you know the coaches are going to say, guys, just get the imports out. Keep rolling imports. That's what's going to happen. Unless you've got guys like Robert Downey or set up who are as good as most imports league, and I never voted for it, right? And I'm being honest with you, I didn't vote for it because I don't think it's the way forward for the team to be as even as the league should have said, to be the way it is now. If we start increasing the import quota, we'll lose the ability to compete the way we do now. And I think it's going to be, we'll have to watch it, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but I'm
the
not
flip
so sure I
side,
agree
though,
with you.
for you, Steve, though, couldn't that mean that there is potentially more talented British players available for you to recruit who don't want to play as a 10, 11 or 12 in Nottingham or Sheffield or Cardiff?
But you've got to remember, in Dundee, it's hard to attract players to come to Dundee anyway, right? It's just where we are geographically, and our finances dictate that we have to spend most of our budget on imported players. Our budget for the British players is effectively what's left in the pot. The teams like Neil, for example,
but if
their British players can earn as much or more than their imports, so they've got a good core of British players. We don't have that financial ability to do that.
But if you are a young British player, say you're 20 years of age, you've played 2 years in the EPL, you want to come and play in the Elite League, and you know the only place where you could get top 3-line hockey is in Dundee, at whatever price.
No, it has
potentially.
It has worked for us. Paul Swindlehurst's a classic example. He came to Dundee totally off the radar for everyone else in the Elite League, and he had a revelation last year. He's in the GB team again this year. He went to the Chicago Blackhawks training sessions during the summer. The guy was off everyone's radar, and we got him for very cheap money on a 2-year deal. Our problem is now, when his 2-year deal's up, where's he want to play? Will he stay with us? That's going to be a difficult one. And he got a great opportunity because we actually only had 2 import D at the start of last year.
Yeah.
So they were out of second shift. You know what I mean? But
It's
that's unusual. That's not the norm. That's unusual.
Going back to one thing that Neil said, and then we'll go back out for another question. Is there any responsibility on the Elite League, which, in your own words, isn't a development league? This is a top-end professional sports league. Is there any responsibility on the 10 clubs to look at junior development, to look at the improvement of British players?
I think, I mean, it's a very tough one because it comes down to coaching at every level. And if you can't, like what Neil said earlier about talking about DOPS, we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. And it's hard because some programs, like Fife has a really good junior development program. Bracknell has maybe the best in the UK, possibly. But you're down to the, you know, it's I'm kind of bouncing around, but I'm a big believer. Like I actually disagree with Neil and agree with Steve on the import level. We wanted to keep it the same. I would have loved to keep it the same because I think the league is competitive, and I'm also biased because I have a British goalie who is good for us, right? And I quite liked the level it was at this year because I worry about more and more imports. I hate to say.
Cardiff hat on,
yeah, my Cardiff hat on.
When
Yeah.
in Belfast, you had the opposite view.
Yeah, I did. and because in Belfast, my Brits were more expensive than my imports, right? So, whereas in Cardiff, we've got talented guys. We've got, you know, like a good example. We've got Chris Jones, who I think is an up and coming player, and I think in a year or two he could definitely be a third liner, maybe even a second liner. Talented kid, getting better and better every year, and bam, import rule changes. Now he's gone from being our 10th guy to probably our 11th guy, you know? And it's disappointing for that. And then we've got a couple guys on two-way contracts with Swindon. We think, you know, like they have no motivation to ever come up because they're never going to get a crack because they're not even on our team. They're on a two-way, and they're just getting older and older. And you talk about the argument with a sports, if you increase the level, there's 50 talented Brits, they don't just move teams. They go down a league. If there was no EPL, but like Danny Myers doesn't get sandbagged from Sheffield. It's not like he went to Dundee. He went to make more money in Telford. Mm-hmm. Jonathan Weaver goes down to make more money, and then and all these guys, they don't shift around our league. They just go down to their local team, and they start training less and becoming an older guy playing in the league below. And I just don't think it works. I also, on a completely different note, GB National Program, I was on Ice Hockey UK board for a while, and they said, what do we do to improve the national program? I said, if you want to make the national program better, put more dual nationals in it to raise the level of players around them. Because not a lot of British players in this league carry their team. They are great assets to their team. They don't carry the line. Robert Dow might be the one difference. But Craig Peacock, great player in Belfast. Craig Peacock doesn't carry a line. He is a great asset on a line, but when all these guys go from being an asset, David Clark's a perfect example in Nottingham. Great player, like probably the best pure goal scorer the Panthers have had in years. And he goes to the national program, and all of a sudden, David Clark doesn't score at the rate he scores at. And everyone's like, what's wrong with Clark? He doesn't score. It's because he doesn't have the same support around him. And like Chris Blight, he's dual national now. He's going to play in the national program. But if you're Craig Peacock, and you just got cut from the national program to a Canadian who takes your spot, basically, right? And to me, you either have to go all British or you just open it up and say, after 2 years, everyone that plays in this league for 2 years, let's get them a British passport. Let's get as many dual nationals till we raise the game. And we get tons of Brits getting better and better around it, so we raise the game of the national program, and then we start getting rid of them. But it's a weird setup. Like we sort of chop and change to decide who's going to be a Brit and who's not, and also a Brit on the national program. You can be Chris Blight is a national program, or he's on the GB national team, and he's an import in our league.
Yep.
Doesn't make sense, you know. So how do you decide? Like it's a flawed system, I think. But
we could be here all day on that. Neil, did you want to come in and respond to that, or?
Well, I mean, no.
You don't feel you have to. I thought you had something to say.
No. I was going to say, look, I think the role of the GB coach, just the same as the role of I think all the coach our team, is to put, they want to win. I mean, I'm actually, I don't know, I would be very disappointed to hear that the GB coach was getting involved in the game of politics and who you pick or whatever. The GB coach, I'm pretty sure, hopefully has picked his best 20 whatever it is players to win games. I mean, that GB coach, if I was the GB coach, I would absolutely, any player who qualifies to play for the GB team, I don't care, I wouldn't care what the rules were fair or not fair. I would want to have the best team on the ice to win the games. That's my job. Somebody else might be, if somebody else is picking the team, that's different, then it's not your job. But if you pick the team, just the same as the coach comes, the coach in Nottingham or the coach in Braehead, he wants to win. That's all he wants to do. He's not interested in developing this or that. He wants to put the best players in there. And I understand that. And that's a bit of the problem you have. So that issue about do players get on the ice or not, whatever, well, you know what? That is professional sport, I'm sorry to say. It's professional sport. The best players, and if Craig Peacock, I usually give as an example, if he was unlucky that he's been cut for some duel, that's tough. Those are the rules.
But what I'm saying is, I'm not using a specific example. I'm saying look at the teams that develop their national program. Very simple. Look at
look at Croatia. Croatia will be a great example right now.
Look at Italy. Back in the day, Austria. What they did is they opened it up to dual nationals, and because I hate to say it, there's a lot of Italian Canadians who come over to Italy and they play in their national team program. There's Italian as they don't speak Italian. They've lived there for 2 years. They get them a passport, and all of a sudden Italy's in the Olympics. And it's not like when you looked at the team in Italy that made the Olympics 2 Olympics ago. 4 Italians, 2 Italians. The rest were Canadian. And as a country, they wanted to get to the Olympics.
And what I can tell you all with my BBC hat on is that if Great Britain had any chance of being at the Olympics, you would get the kind of media coverage for ice hockey in this country that every single person in this room craves. GB got to Latvia, and they're in a qualifying tournament where they lose every game, and they were an absolute disgrace in many respects. But they were on Radio 4 on the Today programme. They're on 5 Live. They're on Radio 2 with Chris Evans. That right there, in one morning, we hit something close to 15 million people. They made their way onto the BBC News channel, BBC World. All of a sudden, it takes ice hockey. And just to give you another example, the Olympics. Do you remember the great game, the Russia-USA shootout? Do you know how many people watched that? 5.5 million people in this country that were watching our sport. If we could just convert a tiny portion of that to come and watch the Elite League, to come and watch the EPL, watch their local team, to be interested in what we're doing, then all of a sudden that's a game changer for everybody, because all of a sudden your big broadcasters start to come back on board, and that's the big thing. If you want to look at rugby league 20 years ago, when they decided to move to the summer, they created Super League. It's a way of something that the ice hockey can look towards, because they rebranded and they found themselves a way of becoming a niche sport that grew, and they grew their crowds, they grew their media coverage, and now they're very much of the fabric of Sky Sports, and Sky Sports kind of make that the event, don't they? Every single Super League game. So it's a really, for the national programme in Ice Hockey UK, they have the biggest challenge, because irrespective of what these guys do, we'll be a minority sport. Because media-wise, we will be, I'm telling you that. And 25 years of experience will lead me down that line. But the other side of it is successful national team, particularly at the Winter Olympics. God in heaven, the BBC just would love to be doing feature after feature after feature on hockey. If only we could ever get there. The only way we will ever get there at this junction will be to have a team full of dual nationals augmented by Brits. It's how you do it, though. Is it worth less? Is it worth more?
Seth, hold on.
Yeah.
Freddie Black has a question. I'm really interested.
I was going to say one thing about the national team. People say improve crowds if the GB team does well. Or if you just look at something like the GB basketball team. They played in the London Olympics, and it didn't make any difference at all to any of their crowds. And the other point I was going to make was about the import limit. Just as a point of just principle about opening up to EUs, is that everyone else in this room, whenever they go for a job, they've got to compete against everyone in Europe. So why is it that hockey players should be above the law, really?
I don't think it's about being above the law. I think it's about when you're a professional sports league, you can decide. You can whether it's a gentleman's rule, whether it's a league-wide rule that we say you have to have an X amount of British players. I don't think, like, you know, depending on what team you're, I don't think people support the Elite League because there's British players in there, but I still think you kind of want a few Brits. You just because, like, whether it's a hometown kid, whether it's, you know what I mean, like, I just think you want a few. And I wouldn't like to see just the Brits where, you know, it's your fourth line and your sixth or seventh defenseman and your backup goalie. I wouldn't like to see that. I think it's nice to see a couple of them playing, you know?
I think the other side of it, though, as well, is every sports fan in any sport likes to see somebody who develops. Somebody they see talent, and they see that talent blossom into something special, irrespective. Did you have a question on the front row here? Yes.
All three of them do.
All three of you.
Is it the same question?
Social media. Yeah. If I walk into any rink in the UK and I start hurling abuse at a player, I get removed. But I go home and I tweet it. Nothing happens. Should players and officials be more protected by the clubs for their fans? Like, I think it was Darnell last season was hounded off Twitter because of a call in a game, and he just got threats galore from a team. I don't know which team it was because he never divulged it, but should the club not have taken more of a stand against their fans and gone, hold on, this is not good enough? I think
you have a choice. You have a choice in your life to be on social media. If you don't want to get abused, don't be on social media. And I hate to say it, if Darnell doesn't want to be, if Darnell is willing to be out there in the world of Twitter, you have a choice to look, you have a choice to be on there. Like, it's different nowadays, right? Like, it's a horrible thing. I can't imagine growing up being in high school. You could have a Facebook account, and you've got kids in America all over the world killing themselves because of abuse on Facebook. Just don't go on Facebook then. Don't go on Twitter.
For me, I never use social media because you're open to abuse. If you put yourself in any sort of public life, be a sportsman, a film star, whatever you are, people either love you or hate you. And if you're an official, right, 90% of people probably hate you anyway. So you're off to a bad start, right? Now that's not how it should be, but that's the way it is. Because we had a coach a couple of years ago, he opened a Facebook account when the team was doing well, and it was all good, and he was like, look at that Facebook. Within 2 or 3 weeks, 2 or 3 bad results. They hate me. I said, well, just close it. Just don't go. You're putting yourself above the parapet.
Yeah, it's the same as forums. Like, don't read forums.
Never.
If you work for a team or play for a team, don't read forums. But also, what we should be doing as a league is, and we have one. We actually have a social media policy, but we don't have the people that are really enforcing it. Like, there are moments, and Simsy's a good example.
Yeah.
He will put stuff out there that he shouldn't put out there, and he's not putting it out as David Sims, who works for the Sheffield Steelers. He's putting it out as David Sims, funny guy, cracking a joke with his buddies. But if you're in that, you have to monitor yourself. And we in Cardiff, and it's a league-wide thing, we kind of adhere. We talk to the guys. We're like, don't tweet anything that a 9-year-old kid shouldn't be seeing. So if you have a day off, don't tweet, the boys are getting bombed tonight, we're going out and getting juiced up. Drives me crazy. Or like at 3 a.m, the injured player, like, selfie with someone at the bar. Like, be smart about it, you know, like, don't do it. And I have like an equipment manager who's like the king of dumb tweets, and I had to tell him last week, I was like, have a what would Todd do rule. Like, would Todd tweet this?
You know what? I have the same rule with Simsy. Most of the time he doesn't remember. I'm like, Simsy, I'm your social conscience.
I'm your social conscience.
Unfortunately, we're still working on that one. Going back to social media, though, there was instance at the end of the season where players were retweeting pictures of referees in other teams' jerseys. I mean, does the league have to be stronger in terms of your teeth with social media?
We have a fine system for that, but the thing is,
it's not been enforced, though, has it?
No, not really. Like, it was a bit last year, but like it never comes down to the player. And honestly, it's a weird thing nowadays. You feel like back in the day, when a ref made a call that you didn't like, or you didn't like another team, you waited till the next game and you either tried to fight the guy or hit the guy, or you yelled at the ref and you got a 10-minute misconduct. Nowadays, everyone turns to social media and they think, geez, my 186 followers need to hear that I hate this. Like, and it could be anything. We've had guys in line at airports. Leeds Airport, what a joke, their Wi-Fi. Or Premier Inn, this is a joke. And I'm like, Premier Inn, one of our sponsors, you might want to remove that. Or, you know what I mean? Fly B, another lineup. And like, people complain to Twitter instead of complaining to the guy next to him. Like, whatever happened to just turning to the guy next to you going, this is a joke, you know? and like, I mean, the guy from, I think it was Plumpton or something. Doesn't
Brad Plumpton, yeah.
Yeah, so it's stupid. Like, what? No one cares that much. No one, we think our followers want to know my opinion on, like, the referees. It's just frustration. I'll just call one of you and bitch about it. I'm not going to bitch to the 200 followers I have, you know? And you can get into arguments. You can get into 5,200. You can't. You don't want to get into like arguments.
How many was that, Todd?
I don't know. I don't really follow it. Like 5,219 or something. I don't know.
Is that at Todd Kelman?
Yeah, at Todd Kelman.
Yeah.
Hashtag.
But yeah, like it's a weird thing. And that's like, I mean, Facebook is great and it's awful. Like, you know, no one puts the bad stuff on Facebook. No. They put on, oh, look at me, I'm in Thailand traveling around the world. They don't put like, hey, look at me, I woke up at 9 and I'm behind a computer desk. Nobody cares about that stuff. You make it look like you're the greatest person in the world. Everyone on Facebook's the greatest person in the world. Stupid.
Let's get another question from here. Good response.
Hi, I'm Katrina from Cardiff. Just one question. We touched on it earlier about the emphasis in this league being towards the league title is kind of the ultimate goal as opposed to the playoffs. And I think a lot of fans, and it's said every year, would prefer that the emphasis is more towards the playoffs. How do you sort of work towards that? How do you create that goal is more the playoffs is the ultimate holy grail as opposed to the league title? And also, a second question, this third, fourth game, which clearly everybody loves because we're still sat here, you know, is there going to be anything further down the line in further playoffs whereby we look to change that and maybe, you know, look to make it a charity game? You know, that's been quite successful at Braehead this season. That's been quite successful at Edinburgh. Is there any sort of ideas about changing that?
What was the first question?
Essentially, can you make the playoffs longer?
All right, let's deal with the first. It's quite a difficult logistical issue because we've got GB effectively going to their training camp on Monday. We've got a league that finished 2 weeks ago. So we've only got, at the moment, unless we made the league considerably smaller, we've got a very small window of opportunity. We've got issues with some clubs and their venues. It's not just the big clubs with the difficulties of booking ice and some of the possibility of booking ice and B, the cost. There's also some of the smaller clubs that can't play certain days. You know, they're very locked into, I don't know, they play on a Sunday, they can't play on a Saturday, or they can't play on a Friday because the disco's on or whatever else is happening in the venue. So unfortunately, we seem to be quite locked into this playoff final weekend, which is a great weekend. And I think everyone agrees it's a great weekend.
But would there be no way that you look at the start of the season, maybe take it forward a week, 2 weeks? Teams are doing that now because of the Champions Hockey League. They're going to have to. Maybe try and squeeze a couple more games in midweek during the season. Then give yourself the month of March for the playoffs. Is there no way that could happen?
I think until we get to a league where we've got a proper playoffs where 2 groups of 8 play each other over a 3-week period, home and away, that builds up a playoff momentum for this weekend. Until we get that, I know that you're starting, but you will always be in a situation where the league is the most important for the fans. And it's all doing to logistics and length of season and lots of things. Ice time, primarily for the bigger arena teams, getting ice time to play these additional games at the end of the season. But personally, I would love to see it where, because if you've had a bad season, to be honest with you want it to end anyway. So if the 2 teams drop out with 3 weeks to go, the season we've had, I wouldn't be too fussed. But going forward, you want to be part of the playoff situation. And back in the day, it was 3 weeks of playoffs, then the finals weekend. That would be the ideal scenario. But it's all to do with logistics, ice time for, not just for the big teams, but probably, we get ice time no problem, but we're quite lucky in Dundee. We can get any ice time I want, you know, apart from a Cullen on a Tuesday night.
Right, I think we're going to have to wrap things up there for the moment. Thank you very much for all of you for coming up and giving a bit of your Sunday morning and trying to share. I hope you felt it was a useful morning for you where you learnt a little bit more about the league that you go and watch and the direction it's going to be going in at least over the next 12 months and maybe a little bit further into the future. Please can we give a big hand though to our top table, Todd, Neil and Steve.
Seth, can I just? Yeah. I just want to finish with something on behalf of the league. Like,
is this your Jerry Springer moment?
Yeah.
Final. Hang on. Shall I set this up?
Final thought.
It was innocent.
No,
ladies and gentlemen.
It's
Todd
just
Kelman
it's
and the final thoughts.
It's important to know that, and I touched on a bit. Like we genuinely try to have the fans' best interest in mind. So the questions you have are all probably, it's great to see that nothing's really coming out that we don't discuss. And it's good for us to maybe explain it. And I think from a board level, one of the things that we have to do is communicate better with our fans, whether it's after a board meeting, have a proper update on the website, because it's just like, we always sit around and discuss like exactly DOPS, 4-man system, the playoffs. How do we make it, is there options to, to make it more competitive? Is there more options to have better dates for the fans? Do people like coming in at late August? Maybe could we push it back? Like, we always are discussing these things. It's never discussing like, once the finance got, like Steve's right, years ago, we every board meeting was 8 hours long and 7.5 were discussing finances, who's struggling, how are we getting through this, how are we going to limp to the end of the season. Now we're coming in, we're all engaged, we're all positive, we're all thinking about our businesses and our fans. And I think the majority of teams, and in one way or another, whether they voice it or not, do have your best interests in mind. And I think as a league, as a whole, we're in a lot better shape than we ever were, and it's probably, the last couple of years have probably been pretty good to support most teams, and the same teams aren't winning it all the time, and hopefully you guys can kind of filter out to your fan bases, and I know it's on YouTube, not everyone's, but let people know that like, we do have a feedback loop, and whether it's emailing the league, and you know what, we'll fix that, we'll start responding to that, but it's nice to know that you can feedback to the league, and hopefully we'll take it on board, talk it out at the board level, and make improvements. Would you guys agree?
Totally agree with that.
And I think hopefully, I can speak for my own clubs, hopefully that process really starts with your clubs. I think first of all, most of the clubs have got some sort of management structure in place where hopefully you can at least send them some valid observations about ways of improving things, or valid criticisms. I mean, the 3rd and 4th place game, I can guarantee you, is a regular topic of conversation every time we get to about January of every year. It's on the agenda in January, it's on in February, it will be on again in April, the 3rd and 4th place game. It is discussed, all these things. I think it's really good stuff. I mean, I think that Todd's right, and the really good thing for fans is we are a business with very few stakeholders, fortunately or unfortunately. We don't have to answer to Sky's not our paymaster. We don't play games on Monday nights because they tell us. We are all without exception, utterly reliant on the fans' revenues to keep our businesses going. So every single club, I would hope, would be completely engaged in realising that the fans are the whole backbone of the business. And without the fans, there would be not one club in this league at all. So we should all be engaged, and we are engaged, and I'm delighted you all came, and I know, virtually all the clubs represented here, and I think it's something we should look to do, not only next year, but I can't see why we can't at least organise mid-year an equivalent, just the fans forum somewhere where you could have some different faces than you currently got up here come along, and we should go through the same process. I mean, I'd have thought, you pick a month.
Webcast that.
Yeah, absolutely. You pick a month and you have it somewhere in December, and we do, we have at least one fans forum where you might have a few GMs maybe up here. It might help as well, and you can voice all the sort of suggestions. I think we should be doing that sort of stuff.
Right, I'm going to stop you there because there is an important hockey to go and watch at 4 o'clock. I have all of the questions here. I'm going to pass all of these on, and they can address as many of them, or at least read as many of them as they like at the next Elite League board meeting as well. But thank you very much to you lot for coming. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks to the guys as well. Thank you.